Evidence that the NBA is rigged. The NBA is plagued with more conspiracy theories and rumors than any other professional sports league. Most of these theories are based upon the idea that all the NBA wants is higher TV ratings. Makes sense, right? After all, the NBA is at its core a media and entertainment organization focused on making money. More viewers and higher ratings means more money coming into the league. While most of the theories that are out there can seem outlandish and far-fetched, there are a couple that stand out above the rest. 1985 NBA Draft. Let's take a trip back in time and revisit the 1985 draft, where the whole idea that the NBA is rigged started. The NBA draft lottery had just been put into place, and the 7 teams with the worst records now all had equal chances of getting the number 1 pick. Before this, the worst teams from each respective conference would partake in a coin flip to decide who got the number 1 pick. Patrick Ewing was the hands-down, consensus best prospect, and some scouts believed he was the most surefire prospect since Lou Alcindor left UCLA in 1969. The 7 teams that made up the bottom of the league consisted of almost all small-market teams, like the Hawks and the Pacers. The New York Knicks were the only big-name team that had a chance of getting Ewing. The NBA's biggest market was the perfect Ewing landing spot for the league, the Knicks and Ewing. The order of the draft was determined through a lottery drawing. All 7 teams would have an envelope with their team logo and name hidden within. The envelopes were then put inside a giant clear plastic drum, mixed around, and then drawn at random. Or at least, that's what the NBA wants us to believe. Conspiracists believe that the New York's card was marked with a bent corner so that it could be identified and left until the end, signifying that the Knicks would receive the first pick. Watch this video, and you'll be able to notice the fold in the envelope that Commissioner David Stern grabs. If the folded envelope theory doesn't tickle your fancy enough, then also consider that the gentleman who placed the envelopes into the plastic drum was none other than Jack Wagner of Ernst & Whinney. Why is this significant? Well, because Ernst & Whinney was the auditing firm for Gulf and Western, who at the time were the ownership group of the Knicks. Some people claim that Wagner purposefully banged the 4th envelope, the one containing the Knicks logo, against the drum so as to create the fold in the corner. In that case, it becomes extremely evident that Wagner was attempting to bend the corner of the envelope for Commissioner Stern. To make matters even worse, consider Stern's comments after the lottery. Quote, "We were very pleased with the lottery. The interest was great. People are talking about the lottery instead of drugs." End quote. More draft drama. When LeBron James first left the Cleveland Cavaliers in the summer of 2010, everyone assumed that the Cavs would be terrible. They just lost the best player in the NBA and replaced him with nothing. The Cavs didn't let anyone down as they finished 19-63 good for second worst in the league. The following summer, they won the draft lottery and selected Kyrie Irving with the first pick in the draft. Nothing weird about that, right? Right. Flash forward to the 2013-2014 seasons. LeBron's contract with the Miami Heat is coming to an end, and there is speculation that he might not re-sign. At the same time, Cleveland is still bad and hovering around the bottom of the league. Still nothing strange yet, right? Right. Well, that is until Cleveland wins back-to-back draft lotteries. Why is this strange, you ask? Well, besides coincidence, there are some who believe that the league rigged these drafts to allow Cleveland to get the number 1 overall pick in order to make it a more enticing destination for LeBron to return to. It's true that Cleveland is a smaller market team and doesn't generate as much interest as teams like New York or LA. However, people love narratives, and the story of LeBron returning to his hometown team in an attempt to bring them their first championship would in theory be a huge hit among fans. Or at least that's what the league must have been thinking. Guess what? They weren't wrong, as LeBron did eventually return to Cleveland and led them to a championship in 2016. NBA is having referees manipulate the outcomes of games. The NBA is an extremely fast-paced sport with a lot of action, which makes it a hard game to officiate. Most of the calls in a game are judgment calls and could go either way. You'll never be able to definitively say whether every single call was correct, and that fact is naturally going to lead to conspiracy theories. However, there are some calls, some games, some playoff series where the calls were egregiously bad. Like, could you make it any more obvious you want this team to win bad? The 2001 Eastern Conference Finals is a great example. The Milwaukee Bucks and Ray Allen were going up against the Philadelphia 76ers led by Allen Iverson. This wasn't the Ray Allen that most people might remember from when he played on the Boston Celtics. This was prime Ray Allen. He was one of the best guards in the game that year and was surrounded by two other all-star caliber teammates in Glenn Robinson and Sam Cassell. The Bucks were clearly the more talented and complete team in the series. However, Allen Iverson was the more popular player on the bigger-name team. Having Philadelphia in the finals would hypothetically lead to more viewers than having Milwaukee. More viewers means more money. Iverson didn't even have a great team surrounding him, and many analysts feel like that Philly team wouldn't even have made the playoffs if it weren't for Al. The first two games that Philly won in the series, games 1 and 4, were decided by a questionable lane violation and two suspect no-calls. Scott Williams was Milwaukee's best big man and was improbably suspended from Game 7 after receiving a flagrant foul in the previous game but never getting ejected. Rewatch the last 7 minutes of Game 7, and with Philly having the win in the books, you'll see the referees making seemingly contactless foul calls against Philly in an attempt to balance the stat sheet. It got so bad that the crowd actually started booing after Sam Cassell went to the free throw line after his defender got called for a reach-in foul, even though he wasn't even touched. If you want to get a clearer picture of how lopsided the officiating was, then check out these stats. The Sixers finished with 186 free throws compared to the Bucks' 120. Philly was charged with 3 technicals, while the Bucks were called for 12. Lastly, the Sixers didn't receive any flagrant fouls throughout the series, while the Bucks received 5 flagrant calls. Ray Allen and then Bucks coach George Karl were fined a combined $85,000 for complaining that the series was rigged, and Allen had this to say in a press conference, quote, "It behooves everybody for the league to make more money, and the league knows that Philly is going to make more money with LA than we would with LA." 2002 Western Conference Finals. Speaking of the Los Angeles Lakers, let's look at their playoff series against the Sacramento Kings in 2002. The Lakers were led by Shaq and Kobe, arguably the two biggest names in the league at the time, and they were coming off back-to-back championships. Chris Webber led Sacramento and was one of the original playmaking big men. That Kings team was fast-paced, shot the ball extremely well, and was flat-out fun to watch. Sacramento, however, was a small market team without any mega superstars. Sorry, Chris. Again, the NBA is all about ratings and which teams will generate the most fan interest and the best storylines. The Lakers were undoubtedly more well-known, and the narrative of them playing for the third championship made for great TV. After 5 games, the Lakers were down in the series, 3-2. Enter Game 6, and probably the most lopsided game from an officiating standpoint in NBA history. LA shot a ridiculous 40 free throws in that must-win game, and an even more ridiculous 27 in the fourth quarter. The New York Times wrote an article in 2008 examining the game, and had multiple quotes from former referees who claimed the NBA directed referees to manipulate the games. If you search the words, "The NBA is rigged," on YouTube, the first 3 results are about this series. The Lakers went on to force a game, which they eventually won, leading to LA eventually winning the title for the 3rd year in a row. Tim Donaghy. Perhaps the most convincing evidence that the NBA isn't as pure as we might all think it is comes from Tim Donaghy, a former referee who was a part of the officiating crew for that LA Kings series. He was arrested in 2007 for betting on games and charged with making calls that would alter the game's outcome. He claims in a book that he wrote that he was simply following orders from league executives they claimed were for the best interest of the league. Yup, you heard that correctly. A former referee wrote a book about how the league isn't as innocent as it appears. He's not the only official to make this claim either. Go back and watch the 2006 NBA Finals between the Miami Heat and the Dallas Mavericks. The Heats had fan favorites, Dwayne Wade and Shaquille O'Neal. The Mavs were led by Dirk Nowitzki, who was receiving a lot of criticism from the media for being soft. The NBA needed another superstar, and they couldn't possibly let it be a foreign player. Insert Dwayne Wade. Wade shot 97 free throws in that 6-game series, the record for the most free throws in any 6-game series. In Game 5, he outshot the entire Mavericks team with 25 free throws. This has been dubbed the Phantom Fouls series for reasons that are obvious. Amazingly enough, while there are countless examples of the NBA being staged, With proof and support from former officials, these seem to be forgotten by the mainstream media. Why? Because everyone is worried about the money. Because the league doesn't have control over whether or not somebody makes a shot or not, it's highly unlikely that the NBA is completely rigged. Actually, it's impossible. However, it's also extremely possible that the league has an agenda and favors certain storylines. To make more money, people are willing to do almost anything. The NBA isn't any different. Final thoughts. Thanks for watching, guys. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like. And if you want to see more of our content, be sure to subscribe. See you next time on UpNext Sports.